Welcome to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking about maintaining motivation in your second semester. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan, that's me, and Lee Burgess. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so that you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. Together with the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we would love to hear from you. With that, let's get started.
Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking about maintaining motivation in the second semester. Whether you're a 1L or a 3L who's about to graduate, this can be a challenge for almost every law student.
That is true.
Or even a 2L.
Yeah.
Really anybody.
Really, exactly. Anyone in the whole process. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, let's talk about why does the second semester, I just think it's such a struggle.
Yeah, I mean, you go home for the holidays or you do something and then you come back, and in most places, winter is depressing.
It is. It is so cold. I remember, I had come from California to New York City, and I think we had the coldest winter they'd had in like a generation. And I remember landing from California in early January at JFK at 2 a.m, and it was sleeting and it was cold and it did not get above freezing for the next 3 weeks. And I did not have clothes for this.
Yeah.
And at that point, nobody's selling winter clothes.
Right.
Like, it's like, oh, spring season. I'm like, no, it's early January. I need like winter boots. Like, I need sweaters. I finally found some sweaters, I think at J. Crew, and I had to buy like 3 different colors because that was literally the only heavy sweaters I could find, and I just wore those all winter. Mm-hmm. And then finally, thank goodness, I ordered the full-length down jacket that is really life-changing if you're in a very cold climate. But you don't know this if you've been living in San Francisco. Like, no. San Francisco doesn't get cold. Tahoe doesn't even get cold compared to this.
Right.
Like, I had ski clothes. They weren't warm enough. Like, it was horrible. I ended up clinically depressed, probably partly because it was so insanely cold and dark and depressing.
A lot of people get seasonal affective disorder, and they don't really realize it.
No, it was crazy. It was a bad winter my first year. I was not mentally prepared. I was not physically prepared, and things did not go well. That was not a fun semester.
And even if you are not someplace miserably cold, it's still dark. Like, it's dark. It gets dark at 5 or something. It just...
5.
Well, in California,
have you ever lived in Boston?
No.
Yeah. No, I clerked in Boston. It literally was dark by 3:45.
Oh my gosh, that's insane.
Yeah, you have no idea. You're a California person. You're dark at 5.
That's why I just don't leave. It's just...
Like, come on. People are listening to this like 5. I would give my firstborn to have light at 5 p.m. in the winter.
Yeah. So if you live through any sort of winter, even the California winter where it gets dark at 5.
Ooh, dark at 5 and it's in the 50s. Oh, it's so cold.
When spring comes, oftentimes you just want to stop working and hang out.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we've survived the winter. Yay! It's like everything is telling you, go outside, hang out with your friends, breathe the wildflowers, I don't know. And then you have exams.
Right. Yeah, it's not great timing. And even in, places where the weather is not extreme like San Francisco, I remember, the spring shifting and all of a sudden, it's April and it's gorgeous and everyone's jogging and you've got to write outlines and study for exams.
Yeah, I think the weather, winter and spring both just make it hard to stay motivated.
Yep. And the other thing that can happen, I think, is that job stuff can be a huge distraction depending on what year you are.
Yeah, and I think this can happen really with any year. If you're a 1L, we recently did a podcast about, finding a 1L job in the spring. And that's the reality for most people is you are looking for these jobs in the spring. Most people haven't gotten them. That's normal. And if you're a 2L without a summer job, you have serious problems.
You're struggling. Yeah, you're scrambling. And
you have a 3L without a job, maybe you're going to put this off until after the bar, and that's totally fair. But you're still this is going to be weighing on most people's minds if you have not secured something for after graduation.
Right. 3Ls also might be worrying about the bar exam.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, because maybe they want to start studying early, or they have concerns, or they have struggled academically, or they're trying to move to a different jurisdiction to take the exam, whatever it might be. That can be a huge distraction as well. Or doing your moral character.
Yeah.
What a distraction.
Or just generally sitting around worrying about the bar,
that
which is what most people just seem to do, is worry about it, not really actually execute on doing a whole lot to prepare.
Yep.
But, worrying about the bar is a common 3L activity, I feel.
Yes. And then if you're on a journal, oftentimes it's very busy in the spring.
Oh, yeah. This is when everything's ramping up. You got to get those, things published. You've got stuff to do. I mean, if you're writing, you may have some writing requirements you need to fulfill. Your own note may be published. All of this stuff can really consume just ridiculous amounts of time.
Yeah. If you have seminar classes, this is
clinics,
when, those papers are really cranking. It can be a lot. And sometimes people are just kind of burning out on school.
Yeah, I mean, you've been doing this for the better part of a year at this point. I think the novelty and excitement has typically worn off.
Yeah. And sometimes you have, spring break happens and then you leave and then it's really hard to come back and refocus, because when you come back from spring break, depending on when your spring break falls, oftentimes you have, like 5-6 weeks of classes left. I mean, it's usually a pretty fast turnaround.
Yeah, I remember my first year we did spring. I mean, I was, like I said, like the worst winter ever in New York. And so my roommate and I were like, we've got to get out of here. Like, what are we going to do? And so we went with some friends to Florida. And it was great. We were in Miami. It was sunny. We're like hanging out on the beach. We're going to clubs. We're having like a great time. And then we have to go back. And
it was still cold, right?
This is horrible. Like, why didn't we go to law school in Florida?
Yeah. So, you've got to find a way to stay focused when you even come back from taking those breaks. The other thing is that a lot of 1Ls are just demoralized by their first semester grades, and it can make you feel like that, there's no way that this is going to get better and you don't have the skills, and, it's going to be hard to move on, and you've got to come up with a way to refocus and regroup.
Yeah, I think overall, 1Ls after the first semester tend to be pretty demoralized because even people who do very well, like typically are not doing as well grade-wise as they've done before, simply because they haven't experienced a curve before.
Yeah.
So, if you're used to getting straight A's in a class where 40% of the people got an A, and now your grades are, B plus, A minus, A, that's actually, those are great grades for first semester.
Yeah.
But you're like, I've never seen a B anything in my life. Like, what is going on? Or you might legitimately have done fairly poorly. When you've never done poorly, you're below the curve and you're just like, oh my gosh, like, am I going to lose my scholarship? Like, people have real problems. And so I think it's hard to sort of stay focused and maintain motivation to try to do better particularly if you feel like you really did everything you possibly could have done. You studied so hard and then you get straight B's.
And sometimes those second semester classes can be doozies. A lot of people take real property second semester. Con law, and it's not like the fun con law. It's typically like federal powers and the commerce clause. It's not the fun cases of like equal protection and
you're like my con law class. They just do everything, and you have a professor who's 95 years old, and assigned something like 50 pages of reading a day, which is really not realistic for con law.
No.
Yeah, that was a struggle.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes those classes do get sometimes harder.
Yeah.
Like they're not like contracts and torts anymore. It's suddenly like this stuff is more complicated.
Yeah. I mean, future interest for real property is no joke.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't even do property till our second year.
Oh, okay.
Which made it even worse.
Yeah.
But because then you're like, why am I taking this first year class when I have other things to do?
So if you find yourself just lacking in motivation or feeling demoralized, I mean, there are definitely some things that you can do to regroup. So what do you think is kind of the first thing that people need to do?
Well, I think the first thing is actually just really recognizing that it's common and kind of accepting it. And just, like sometimes we talk about just sort of sitting with that feeling.
Yeah.
Kind of recognizing this feeling of like, okay, let me try to identify what's going on here. Am I feeling burned out? Am I feeling tired? Am I feeling frustrated? Rather than just feeling like you're some terrible person,
right,
or that you're a total loser, or that you're not trying hard enough. Like that type of talk is not really productive. It's really more about like, okay, what is going on here? For me, at some point, it was like, okay, I think I might actually be depressed, and I think I might need to go and talk to somebody about this. Like, let me look at the evidence. I basically haven't really left the house except to go to class, and like not even always to go to class. I'm not sleeping, not really eating. Like, this seems to be a little beyond just like I'm feeling sad.
I'm having
it's
a hard
cold
time.
out. Yeah. So I think not necessarily judging how you're feeling, but really like getting clear on this. So like, is it just that I'm not feeling that motivated? Maybe I need, a little help, or is this something beyond that?
Yeah, I think that's true. And then utilizing all your resources.
Right.
We talk about this often at the schools. I'm sure schools, especially where it gets very dark and cold, have people that you can talk to about this because it's very common.
Yeah, they weren't surprised, in January when a law student showed up at like the student mental health services to be like, I think I'm depressed. I need a therapist. They're like, great, we'll get you signed up right away. Somebody can see you tomorrow. Does that work for you? Like, they're used to this.
Yeah.
And frankly, like I've said before, that was probably one of the better decisions I've ever made in my life was like walking through that door and being like, okay, I am not all right. I need help with this.
Yeah. The other thing that we forgot to talk about that happened to me for a semester in the winter was I got the flu, which I hadn't gotten in years.
True, because you're like not sleeping, not eating, stressed out, etc.
Right, and you're with a whole group. You're sitting in these rooms with like all of these people.
Well, and particularly now, I've got some crazy viruses possibly circulating in the world. Who knows?
So one of the other things I think that can be challenging about second semester is oftentimes people come back from break with all sorts of new viruses.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get sick, and it can be really hard to regroup from that.
Oh, yeah. A friend of mine actually came back from Christmas break. She didn't know this for 2 years with like a parasite from a beach in like Central America. Ugh. And was literally like sick for basically 2 years until they finally figured it out. But that started in January of her second semester.
So I remember sitting in class and not feeling great. And then the professor, my real property professor, I started seeing double. And then I turned to my friend and I was like, I think I might have a bad fever. And she's like, please leave. I'll give you all my notes. She was like, please walk to student services. Like, please leave this classroom. Like, I don't want you to sit next to me. Like, but I was out for days. It took me days to regroup. And then you have to kind of play catch up and have a strategy and not let that derail you.
Oh, yeah. I'd forgotten about it. I've blocked this one out. But yeah, at some point in like the early spring, when it was supposed to be, the busiest day of my entire semester, literally I had like 8 things I was like totally committed to doing, and I ended up getting called on in like 2 classes. However, I was not in either one of them because I had incredibly terrible food poisoning.
Oh no.
And spent the entire day at the health center like trying to convince them to give me IV fluids until finally they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
stuff
great.
Happens. So you have to be able to, be in a place where you can strategize and ask for help and regroup. And that's where I think you call in, your village. And it could be like, I've missed these classes, or you talk to your professors. I think so often we feel like we can't ask for help, that it's a sign of weakness. But I remember getting the flu and me emailing my professor and being like, I'm the flu. And she's like, please do not come to class.
Right, exactly. Like don't do that.
You can follow up, come to office hours. I will answer your questions, get notes from somebody else. But I think we forget that they don't want you there. They don't want you there. They want you to take care of yourselves.
Well, and it's just not really a great idea for you to do for anyone else in your class to show up like terribly sick. If you're in that scenario, just stay home. Someone will help you.
Yes.
If your professor won't help you, call the dean. The dean is not going to tell you to go to class if you're running like 103-degree fever and puking.
Yes.
Just don't do that.
Yes.
But yeah, I think the illness thing is also really tends to come into play second semester.
I think that's true. All right. So, so these things happen. But when you are really derailed, along with, reaching out and asking for help and realizing that this is super common, I think you also have to reconnect to your why and focus on that. So, we even talk about to students and people studying for the bar, like write yourself a letter about why you wanted to go to law school. Like sometimes you can really get caught up in the inertia and forget that there's a reason why you're there.
Right. No one is holding a gun to your head, hopefully, and forcing you to go to class. If your parents are doing that, like you should probably have some conversations about that. But, basically this is a voluntary choice and you can opt out at any time. And I think even that can sometimes give people just enough perspective to sort of be able to take a deep breath and say, okay, you know what? Like I am choosing to do this. Like this is my choice. No one is forcing me to do this. I'm going to kind of take a step back and deal with it.
Yeah.
And part of that, I think, is, this sounds a little bit counterintuitive if you're feeling unmotivated, but I think the key oftentimes is really to give yourself a break.
Yeah.
take that time off, because if you block out, say what I used to like to do, probably not in the middle of the winter so much, but like at least in the fall, I remember doing this in the spring, is I would take really long walks like all over New York. And New York is a great walking city. You can just point in a direction and walk and walk and walk and walk and walk for hours. But, doing that on purpose allowed me to say, okay, I'm going to take this afternoon off, but then I'm going to come back tomorrow and I'm going to start working on X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. I also think sometimes just changing it up, like from a business perspective, we will take at least like a little retreat once a year where we just go somewhere. It doesn't really matter where we go. And we even find that just by changing our location or working different hours or having different dialogues, it just changes and allows us to get stuff done that maybe we've been noodling on for an incredibly long time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I used to study. I remember whenever it was around exam time, I would basically rotate through a bunch of different libraries on campus just to have a different place to study.
Yeah.
So I'm like, today I'll go to teachers college, and then tomorrow I'll go to the social work school, and then I'll go to the business school, and I'll go to the architecture school, and I'll go to the undergrad. I had like my favorite spot in all of these libraries. But if you are feeling really just burned out and unmotivated, something like that can even shift your perspective enough to allow you to be like, oh, okay, I'm not so bored. I'm at least in a pretty library.
Yeah, I used to study at the UCSF Medical School Library, which has sweeping views of the Golden Gate.
Nice.
And I found it very refreshing.
Yeah.
I would just walk in and it was like beautiful, and there were no other law students there, and medical students would sleep in there. It was all very, very nice, very pleasant.
Yeah, I think you can just like mix it up, and again, it's like this is about paying attention to even who you're spending time with, even if it's people you're not actually talking to. Like, are these people dragging you down, or are they helping your mood?
Yeah.
I always actually liked hanging out in the undergraduate library because they were kind of like peppy.
Yeah, they were having fun.
Yeah, they were like
so serious.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I avoided the law school library like the plague because it just depressed me to walk in there and see all these people who were so stressed out. Business school library, also great. Like, apparently they just, their schools seem to be hanging out. And that was what they got graded on or something. I don't know. They never seemed to be doing any actual work. They were just networking. But it was kind of refreshing. You're like, oh, wow, these are people who are like also in grad school and they're not totally miserable. Maybe it's possible.
And I used to try and remind myself that law school was a privilege. I think that I had worked, and I know you'd worked too, and there is something about going back to school after working, because there were so many things about being in school that I enjoyed.
Right, like being able to, go to a gym class whenever you wanted.
And like I used to go to Trader Joe's at 9:00 on a Monday morning, and nobody was there. It was magical.
Oh yeah, we go to Fairway in New York, which is normally super crowded on the weekends. And if you go at like 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, you walk right in.
Super easy. And so, just even reminding yourself like that, I traded in a job for this, and, I was going
about all the money that you're spending and not getting.
But, that I really tried to make the most of it and make sure that I enjoyed the school lifestyle, because it was, going to be for a limited amount of time.
Yeah. One thing I would always do is we had, I don't know if they're free. I think they're very low cost classes at the gym.
Oh, yeah.
And so my roommate and I would always pick like some random class to sign up for, like once or twice a week, maybe like 2 or 3 times a week. Like one time in the winter we did belly dancing. And that sounds silly, but it was great exercise, and it was a really fun class. And for 1 hour twice a week we would go and belly dance, and I think we even liked it so much we got a video series to watch at home with like, oh God, it was so funny. I remember there were like these twin sisters who were belly dancing instructors. I don't know, someone can go find that. But that was like what we did on our off days from belly dancing class, is we would belly dance in the living room. Because like, why not? Who cares?
Well, and I think that's a great example of sometimes really mixing it up and doing something goofy. Like I was, I don't know, a couple months ago, I went and took like a hip hop dance class. And,
if you've never seen a picture of Lee, she does not look like a person who would be into hip hop dancing.
Hey, I used to do that sort of dancing back in the day in a different life, but I looked goofy, I'm sure, but I like love listening to loud music, and I like, it makes me feel like a different part of my life when I used to do that sort of stuff more. And there's like something fun about that. There's something about kind of connecting to different parts of yourself and being silly and laughing at yourself, and it just lightens everything up.
Oh yeah, sometimes my roommates and I, we had this tiny little kitchen in New York City, but I don't know why we did it always in the kitchen. But we would put on like a couple of our favorite songs and literally like dance around like crazy people in the kitchen. And I just remember like it faced a stairwell and we'd look out and see other people like staring at us like we were totally insane, because I'm sure we looked crazy.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it was great. You know, why not?
Oh yeah, we used to do that in college. I can't remember. There was some song that my college roommate and I would probably get drunk to, and then we would like throw our stuffed animals around the room and like dance to. I cannot remember what it was, but it was just, I
remember one of them. It was called The Kids in America. I love that song. And it was a total one-hit wonder from a band you probably never even heard of, but it was like a really great song to just dance around to.
Yeah. So anyway, just, you know, don't worry about whether or not it makes sense to be spending your time doing this sort of stuff. I think the reality is that doing things outside of your comfort zone, or being able to be silly, or, you know, go to if you're worried that your law school classmates are going to see you somewhere, like go somewhere across town where they're not, you know, you're not going to run into anybody, but doing something just for you, it can do a lot for your mood and make it easier to refocus.
Yeah, I think fun, like, you know, people forget to have fun.
Yeah.
And you can have fun in just a couple of minutes. Like, it doesn't have to be this thing, you know, that you're going to plan your whole day around it. It's like you can just put on your favorite. I mean, I used to have a playlist that I would listen to over and over that just had like upbeat music on it. You know, and like every time I now hear this one Beyonce song, I'm immediately transported back to like my first year of law school. You know?
I do think that we lose fun a lot. Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot, about, you know, what's the difference between fun and joy and productivity and feeling good about things. But, you know, this is our one life. You know, you are living while you're in law school. And if you are debilitatingly miserable, then you probably need to ask yourself some serious questions, because life is happening right now.
Yeah. And, you know, I think, you know, there are things you can do like that are pretty predictable that are going to probably improve your mood. So, you know, I mentioned like gym classes, that hits a couple of things. It's a commitment to do something for yourself. Right. It's also something you're doing in a group. Yep. It's something that hopefully is fun for you. You know, so I played squash and did squash classes and did belly dancing. I mean, you know, I tried not to do the stuff that seemed like a drag. Like, you know, I was like, oh, that seems very serious.
And even going back to stuff that you may have liked when you were much younger, or a teenager, or a kid. You know, I think I have a lot of friends who used to be dancers, and they talk about like going to take a ballet class. And, you know, they're like, I might be in my 30s and have not taken a ballet class in 10 years, 15 years, but then they do it, and it brings them joy in a way that they don't get that joy. You know, I used to sing, and sometimes like singing is something that can connect me to a different part of myself that I didn't used to be. So yes, I do love hip hop dance classes. I also used to train in opera. I'm a complicated person.
Aren't we all?
Aren't we all?
Yeah, I actually I signed up for ballet when I was in my first grad school. But unfortunately I was getting credit for it, and I almost failed it because I kept like not being able to go. So that did not bring me joy.
That's different. That's
did not
spark joy.
I do not recommend trying to get credit for your program for a PE class, because that is just going to increase your stress level.
Yeah.
It seems to be a recurring theme. I almost didn't graduate from college because I was about to fail my aerobics class, which I was required to take something, and it was awful. It was like 8:30 in the morning.
I definitely did not take a physical education class.
We had to. It wasn't.
Really?
I mean, yeah, to graduate from college, I think you had to take like 2 or 3. It was insane.
Oh, that is
plus
weird.
Pass a swim test. But yeah, I had like some ex-cheerleader at like 8:30 in the morning, and it was just it was terrible. It was really terrible. But like literally I wasn't going to graduate if I didn't finish it.
Yeah. That's not good.
So yeah, take voluntary classes. Yeah. Do not take credit classes that you're going to end up regretting.
Another thing that you've got to watch out for is being a perfectionist.
Oh yeah.
Because this
is a big one.
This is a big one. And don't we have a great article somewhere about recovering as a perfectionist?
Probably.
By Judy Cohen. But, you know, this is something a lot of us struggle with, because the personality type that becomes a lawyer oftentimes has perfectionist tendencies.
Right. It's very common. Yeah. So, you know, if you are part of motivation is kind of feeling like you're able to succeed. So if you don't feel like you're able to succeed because you've set your expectations so incredibly high, it's going to make it really hard to stay motivated. You know, so I don't want to say like set your goals super low, but like set your goals reasonable. Yeah. You know, and like if you're having a bad week, a reasonable goal might literally be to show up to class and like do your reading. Like that's enough.
Yeah. And sometimes that's all you can ask yourself, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, what I learned in my second semester of law school when I was clinically depressed for half of it and basically wasn't going to class or doing anything is that you can actually do a lot in a very small amount of time if you really focus and if you really need to.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, I mean, we got to a few weeks out from exams and like I was kind of a mess, let's face it. You know, like I don't think I'd read anything for con law. It just wasn't going well.
Yeah.
So I asked like good friends of mine. I was like, look, I'm struggling right now, and like I need your help. You know, can you like help me with this class? And a lot of them said yes. You know, because we were friends, and like I would have done the same for them, and maybe did do the same for them later on. But I remember sitting down like 2 weeks before exams or something, like including the reading week, and being like, okay, it is time to triage. You know, like, what am I going to do? And, at some point I remember my therapist being like, well, do you even, like, are you going to take your exams? I'm like, of course I'm going to take your exams. She's like, well, I mean, you could probably get them postponed. I'm like, no, I'm going to take them. She's like, all right, you're committing to taking them. And I was like, yes, I'm committing to taking my exams. All right. And, like, once you made that commitment, it's like, all right, what am I going to do to try to make this not be a total mess?
Right. And a lot of that can be sitting down with someone in academic support or with a tutor or even a TA for a class and being like, okay, not everything's going to happen. So what's in and what's out, and really making that triage list.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is, all of these first year classes, you can get a commercial outline for basically, unless your school is doing something super weird, in which case there's probably a pretty good one from a previous year from someone who was, very into the class, floating around. Just get that and start with that. Like you got to be realistic. Like, you may not be getting A+, but you can probably do okay if you just basically like get a commercial outline, learn the basics, do some practice questions, particularly if it's open book,
And you can't go back to the beginning of the semester. I think this is one of the things that happens to a lot of folks second semester when they do get derailed. Like I remember when I got the flu and somebody was like, well, you can't go back and reread everything. Like, you've got to just like cut your losses, like take your notes, like skim some briefs and move on. Like you can't go back and do like 4 days of reading because you had the flu.
No, exactly. It's like at some point it's just like you got to work with what you have.
Yeah.
And you have to be realistic about that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, also I think people can get really caught up in like this guilt cycle of like, oh, I can't believe like I wasted all this time at the beginning of the semester. Like I should have been doing this and I should have been doing that. And it's like, okay, maybe you should have been, but that's not really where you're at.
Right.
Like you got to evaluate the situation, figure out a way to move forward and start executing on that plan right now.
Yep.
Because that is the only way that you're going to like get out of the semester alive.
Yeah. So in the end, this is a struggle for a lot of law students. So if you are struggling with motivation or getting your act together second semester, you are definitely not alone. So if you can just recognize this is what's happening, that is definitely step one. And realize that doing less could actually be the answer. As long as the time you do the work is focused, you're welcome to take some time off and get some R&R and relax.
Yeah, I think that's the key. It's like you've really got to figure out like what is going to give me the most bang for my buck here.
Yeah.
All right, what do I need to do in the rest of my life to be able to do that? And maybe that means that, you commit to only studying 5 hours a day during the reading week. Like, I don't really care. I'd rather have you study 5 hours a day of like really focused work and like doing practice questions and like, doing all that than to pretend to study for 10. Like, what's the point?
It's so true. I remember by my third year, second semester, I would try and leave the library at 7. Like I had to go home and eat like a good dinner and not eat like crap out of the like the student services, little like kiosk thing or whatever,
wrap or whatever.
Yeah, that was like $15 or something like that. But I think that setting those parameters sometimes at 5 o'clock. I'm one of those people who always had like the lull at 4:30, where it's like, it was hard to get motivated. But if I'm like, okay, well, you only have to be motivated until 7. I could sometimes like squeeze out the rest of the work, and then I got to go and like eat a good dinner and then like hang out with my boyfriend or whatever and be happy. And I think that, that kind of, even that goal setting of breaking up my day was very powerful than my friends who would sit in the library and watch The Daily Show until like 11 o'clock at night and then be like, I was at school all day.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where like getting serious about your schedule is what you need to do, especially around blocking out that time to do the deeper work and also the job hunt, so you do need time to do that, but you also have to make sure it doesn't take over.
Yeah.
So if you, say you study 5 hours a day and then you work on your job for 2 hours a day, that's great.
That's great.
If you do that day after day, you're good.
Yep.
I'd rather have you do that than like pretend to be doing stuff that you're not really doing for, so many hours a day that you can't sleep.
Yep. So the reality is all is not lost. You just need to come up with a plan and then try and execute it and take care of yourself.
Yeah. I recommend restorative yoga.
That's a good one.
Totally great. It's my new thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, something that like truly is relaxing is a very good way for you to spend time.
Yep. All right. Well, with that, we are out of time. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app. We'd really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.